Hey, okay, how you doing? We're back for
I'm
part
doing well.
2.
Absolutely. Excited to be here.
Yes,
Thank you.
I am so excited to have you. That the first conversation we had was so amazing, and you were dropping stuff faster than I could write it down. But there was one tweetable that you said, which I thought was so powerful, which is there's always a story behind the glory. So for
Absolutely.
those of you that don't know, I did an amazing conversation that I had with OK Enya. And, the question is, do Black men do therapy? Let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about Black men and therapy. And so that's what we're going to do. And so, for those of you who may not have seen the first recording, I want to just share a little bit about OK and who he is. And so, welcome everyone. I'm super excited. So, OK Enya, MPH, Masters of Public Health, is founder and CEO of Enya Strategies LLC, which is a health policy consulting firm that provides advising, research support, policy analysis, project management, and legislative strategy for individuals and entities seeking measurable ways to influence policy on issues related to health equity, health disparities, social determinants of health, and health in all policies. He is the author of Indisputable, the story of a favored son, which chronicles his life story from Chicago to Capitol Hill. So thank you so much again for joining in, and I cannot wait to dive in. There's always a story behind the glory. So for those who did not see the first video, can we just jump in real quick and just briefly explain what you mean by that? Because basically what I was asking you is, I'm like, you got it all together. You got the job, you got the business, you're extremely educated, super successful. What in the world do you have to talk to a psychologist about?
Yes, that's a great question. And the way in which I look to answer that question usually is that your mental, emotional, spiritual, physical health, all of those are connected, obviously. But the foundation is, I think, it starts with your mind, and having the support systems in place to encourage a growth mindset and emotional health. And so, um, self-care is fundamentally key for me. Like, that is the bedrock, that's the foundation.
Yes,
And
yes.
what people see is the byproduct of the inner work or the soul work, the work that you put in your emotional life, in your mental life, in your physical life, in your spiritual life. What you see is the outcome of the work being put in. And
Woo-hoo.
it it takes it takes a willingness to surrender your life to the process.
Yeah.
um, and that's been that has been part and parcel of my story, as I write about in my book, is that from childhood, high school, college, grad school, med school, Capitol Hill, there have been those critical junctures, those milestones, those life moments, those defining moments where I've had to make those very hard decisions to submit what I want, my own agenda, how I want to proceed with things, to submit that to, as a Christian, to my faith, to look forward to the better outcome or outcomes, right? And so that it's the inner work, the soul work is what has been I've been very intentional about putting in, to ensure that the product or the outcomes are what you see. And so that is a longer way of saying, yes, there's always a story behind the glory.
Right, right. That's really powerful. That's really powerful. I don't know why it's so hard for people to understand that mentally, because if you see, Black Panther or Thor, these people are working out, right? They're in the gym several hours a day to get that
Right.
body, right? So you
Yeah.
don't just have, yourself together mentally and emotionally by doing nothing. right? You have to put the work in, and so that you labeled it soul work, I think is super important. So there was something that you said in an earlier conversation that I wanted to jump back on, dare I say,
Mhm.
veggie back on. Very, very important. And you said it so quickly, I just wanted to jump in on it. You said you realized at some point that you were depressed, right? And
Mhm.
so I wanted to jump into that. What do you mean? Like, how did you come to a realization that you were depressed?
Yeah. So it actually wasn't me per se. I had so part of my story is that when I went to med school, and it was a very intense season of my life because I was one of a few black men in my class, and I was going to a predominantly white institution, which was a very hostile, toxic environment.
Ooh.
And so in that process of working through the racial trauma and just the racial microaggressions, I didn't know because I didn't have the language for what I was thinking and feeling. And it wasn't until I was at the place where I was actually in transition out of med school, where the dean of the med school, he said in a conversation that he had seen that I had become depressed, and so when he said that, I was surprised and almost shocked because I'm like, what do you mean?
Ah.
Um, at that time, I didn't know the signs and symptoms of depression in the ways that I know them now. And we're obviously all different, and we all experience grief and depression and anxiety differently, which is so key. But there is a general framework in terms of signs and symptoms. And so for me, I was surprised, but it that caused me to dig deeper. And then what happened after that was that one of my fraternity brothers, kind of maybe about a month or two later, um, I was actually serving as a guest speaker for an event that was centered on Black men and health equity and things of that nature. And in the course of my talk, as he was kind of tag teaming, and I was sharing my story, he also said, kind of in his own unique way, that those are signs of depression. I'm like, wow, okay. So it like this is like I was literally living it, and I
Wow.
didn't know.
And it
And
was
so it
visible
was
enough for other people to see, like other people
right,
were tagging it for you. Wow.
right,
Okay.
right. And even in that, I wasn't, I can't say that I was like losing sleep, or I had a loss of appetite, or I had suicidal ideations. It wasn't kind of in that necessarily spectrum. It could just be just you feeling just not yourself. You feeling not, it's just you're just not feeling the way in which you normally perhaps should be feeling. And even in that, that's really hard to pin down, right? And
Right.
so
Right.
it really takes kind of finding the language and being intentional about creating a support system to help to serve as a sounding board for you, and to really kind of encourage you to dig deeper and to further explore how you are showing up in the world.
Right.
And so, and even prior to my time in med school, I was very intentional about creating a, as much of a strong support system to help me to navigate. So that was very helpful, and since that time, I've been very intentional about seeking that type of support, and uh, I've become a self-care enthusiast as a result. So
Right, right. So, what was the framework for you? Since you brought up the idea of framework, and if there could be some black men listening that they're like, well, I wonder what it could be for me, and then I'll also tag team on that. But what was it for you?
yeah, so I think finding the language about racial microaggressions,
Ah,
bias, just the various ways in which I was being talked to and treated as a conscious black male. just
Yes.
not being respected, getting the societal messages of not feeling of value or of worth, and being getting messages about being criminalized and being pathological. So it's all of the negative stereotypes and racial biases that are out in society as it relates to being Black, right? And then if you want to add the layer of gender there as well, that too.
Right.
And so because just simply as men, it is more it tends to be more challenging for us as men to be open enough to share, to one, to even get to a place where we understand what we're thinking and feeling, and then to pivot further to be able to put language or words to what we're thinking and feeling.
Right.
There's a whole thing around that.
Yes.
And so um, being able to really find the language to articulate what I'm feeling. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling disappointed. I'm feeling disrespected. Finding those words. Um,
Instead of
ha,
internalizing it and holding on
exactly.
to it. Right, right. Because the
Right.
internalization and the holding on to it is what creates the depression.
Right. Right. And so, and as well, it is very rare that you'll find safe or safer spaces for Black men to just talk, to just put the mask down, put the armor down, just share, just talk out what they're thinking and feeling. There are very few safe or safer spaces for that to happen.
Right.
And so at the same time, I've been blessed as well to have along my kind of life and career to have those spaces to begin to explore my emotions and why I am where I am, why I think the way I do, why am I feeling this way? What are my triggers?
Right.
And so part of that came from the different communities that I've built in terms of my church family, my my fraternity, my biological family, other members of my community, of my life, um, who I've pulled from to create a dream team that includes members of my inner circle, which which covers my spiritual mentors, my research and academic mentors, um, my business mentor, my Black male psychologist, my financial advisor, my CPA. So I have this dream team that I put in place because of my own life experience, because I know that with my assignment and my mandate and the impact that I want to have on the world stage, it's going to take that level of support to be able to really effectively manage and to steward what I've been called to manage and steward.
Wow, that's really powerful. Ooh, there's so many directions I want to go, but I do want to be respectful of time. But there is something that you kind of talked about that I think is important, and that is that, having that dream team is extremely
Mm-hmm.
important, right? And I want to say that if you feel a certain way, right? If you feel like you're not yourself, you mentioned that. It could be that you feel like you're not yourself. If you feel like you're
Yeah.
not yourself for about 2 weeks, I just want to say this for anyone who may be listening, for about two
Mm-hmm.
weeks, sadness, feeling a little bit off center, it to all of us all the time. But if it lingers
Right.
for about 2 weeks, that's about the time where you need to go, you know what, this doesn't seem to be, this heaviness does not seem to be
Yeah.
moving, right? And so you
Right.
can start with your primary care physician. If you don't want to go the mental health route immediately, and there are many different types of counselors. There are marriage and family counselors, children, there's social workers. I mean, they're all different types of people. So you can look to see, and we're going to dig into a minute, about how you
Mm-hmm.
chose your therapist. But I think it's extremely important for people to know that that's about a benchmark. You've been going for more than a couple of weeks and you feel like you're a little bit off, then that's something that you need to look at. And so before we jump into how you chose your therapist, I think it's really important, for you to just kind of to share with people, when you're when you're pulling your dream team together, right? It doesn't happen you say it's intentional, but when you think back, it's like, you've always had a support system, right? And I
Yeah.
wonder if therapy is the thing that helped you recognize it, because all the stuff that you mentioned you had racial microaggressions. Have the racial microaggressions stopped?
Nope.
Have white folks stopped being crazy? I
Nope.
mean, are people still hating on you because
Of
you're
course.
succeeding, and people from all over the place? I mean, that stuff is still happening. So the same stuff that you had to
Mhm.
go through before that caused you to be depressed, right?
Right.
Now you're dealing with the same things, but you're not allowing that to throw you off your game. And I just want to speak to that. I want you to speak to that for a moment, because I
Sure.
think that's really important for people to understand. You had a
Mhm.
bunch of people that loved and supported you, right? And you still felt
Yeah.
depressed. And then you
Mhm.
got to this place where you're still dealing with this stuff, but you transcended it, right? So I just want you to
Sure.
speak to that for a moment.
Sure. Absolutely. So, it wasn't until, and so I'll say that it's been a process, and I've evolved, right? And so it wasn't until I started seeing my black psychologist 2 years ago, where I was in a setting that was non-judgmental, that was a safe space, that
Yes.
that provided the language and the coping skills and strategies that could fortify what I brought to that context. So it's it
Yes.
that and in that context is where I was again and being intentional about being transparent, being vulnerable enough to just talk, like literally just talk, just vent, and try to find the language. And then what would happen in the sessions is that he would put language to what I was feeling,
Ah,
and and then as well, kind of part of my homework, or kind of my soul work that I mentioned earlier, is I would Google what's called an emotions wheel, or an emotions chart, something like that, that has the literal terms for all types of emotions. And so in my sessions or outside of my sessions, as I was living life, and I was still living, I had learned how to sit with my emotions, and to journal, and to meditate, to breathe, to, there's a whole cadre of self-care tactics and strategies that I have either acquired or fine-tuned over the years, that have got me to this place where now as I experience life, and I might, some life event might occur, someone might say something, something might happen, some trauma, grief, sadness, whatever.
right.
I'm better able to process it, to understand it, to unpack it, and
Yes.
to apply the skills and the right approach to really overcoming whatever emotions were triggered, right?
Right.
And so, yeah,
I think it's important that you say that, because Black men, and I think men in general, are told, hey, just man up and take it. Just
right,
stuff it. Just,
hmm,
what do you need to talk about it for? Right? And
right,
then we see these same people, right? At least the people that are public figures, we see them lose their families, their careers,
right,
their jobs, their everything. Why? Because they just stuffed it and stuffed it and stuffed
right,
it until they acted out to the point where, you know, they've lost everything that they love, right? And so
right,
these strategies, these coping strategies that you're mentioning, that, like meditation and journaling and breathing, these are all things people be like, oh, that's just woo woo, right? That's just kind
hmm,
of, woo woo stuff. And they're not recognizing the
right,
value of being still and sitting with your stuff, right? And then
right,
processing it. So, um,
right,
these are things we need to learn how to do. And the whole country has now shut down, and people are forced to
right,
sit with their stuff. And what's happening? They going crazy because they ain't got no coping skills,
right,
right? I've been having a good time. I'm like, ooh, I got time. Oh, I'm gonna sit down. I'm gonna sit
hmm,
under this tree and contemplate life. This is great. People are
yeah,
going nuts, right? And
yeah,
it's
yeah,
because they don't have those skills. So for people that will be listening in, right?
Mm.
Let's just get really granular, right? How
Okay.
did you choose this specific Black male therapist? Right? You like,
Absolutely.
why was it, for you, it needed to be a Black male? And what was it
Mhm.
about that person that just was like, ooh, this is the right fit?
Yeah. So part of it is the level of social support or your social capital, I think. And
Mhm.
um, what I mean by that is I've had the blessing of navigating different circles of that have people who have the network and the resources to be helpful. And so a few years ago, I was working with my fraternity brothers. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha, and I was at a place where I was also starting my doctoral program. And in the course of some conversations within my circle, they had mentioned that it would be very helpful for you to lock in a psychologist to help you through your program because I'm in a doctoral program that is a PWI. So, and for context, I am one of two Black males in my cohort of about 25 to 30 people, and there are three Black females, right?
Wow. And what is a
So,
PWI for people that don't know?
yeah, so a predominantly white institution.
Uh-huh.
So, right. So again, so I went to a PWI for college and for med school, but then I went to a minority serving institution for my master's in public health, and the MSI is similar to an HBCU. So I have the frame of reference to compare the environments, the context, the atmospheres of a PWI and an MSI in terms of support and nurturing. So all of that prior experience informed my intentionality around trying to secure support as I navigate my doctoral program now as one of only two Black males in my cohort, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I asked around, and one of my friends who happened to be a psychologist, uh, I asked him if he had any recommendations, and he gave me a few. And I was very intentional about asking for Black men because from a cultural standpoint, and this is me from a cultural standpoint, it's just very important for me to connect with in this case a therapist who can understand where I come from and can speak to those very nuanced issues. Now, let me also say though that it's critically important for you to find the right fit. So whatever fit looks like for you, then
Yes.
by all means do that, right?
Yes.
For me
Yes.
personally though, for me personally, I was adamant about trying to connect with a conscious Black male psychologist because you can kind of get past the racial stuff and just there's this whole veneer around just the culture piece, and I'm very
Right.
Afrocentric as
Right.
well,
Right.
and so and as I'm having a conversation with him and building that rapport and that trust, which comes with sharing a common culture and life experience, that was helpful in allowing me the space to bring the guard down, to just be vulnerable, to just share.
Right.
And so that was, and so once, and I know and I hear this a lot, is that it is very difficult to find a culturally sensitive therapist. Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And especially for Black people,
Yes.
I get it. And so for some people, it might take a few times to find that one that you feel that you can work with.
Yes.
But there's a plethora of resources out there that can help to kind of hone your search. And so since I've started working with him, I started working with him monthly, and now I'm seeing him weekly
Mm.
because as I have matriculated through the program, it's gotten more intense. And also with, I mean, I've just seen all of the benefits as well of going to therapy. And in fact, I have a whole list of benefits here that I can, talk about. But certainly, let me just kind of pause there and, just kind of see if you had any questions about what I was
Yes,
saying.
yes. I mean, there, we have to have like 20 more different conversations. I mean, the whole idea of, of you saying out loud and putting words to it that I am a Black person that is trying to better myself. I'm educating myself, and I'm in an institution where there are not a lot of Black people, and the environment is so hostile that I have to seek therapy to get through it, right? I mean,
Right.
that is really intense. And from my own personal experience, I never had a Black teacher until I got to college, right? And
Yeah.
so I need some therapy around that because it was rough. It was
Yeah.
rough
Oh yeah.
growing up. I didn't even
Yeah.
have a Black custodian in the school.
Yeah.
Like it was,
Yeah.
it was very, very, very hostile. And it's so hard to describe those. The thing is that uh, Black folks from generations past, and this is something that I think is important for us to make a distinction. To protect the younger generation, a lot of the older generation folks would try to protect us by not
Right.
talking about stuff, right? And so
Absolutely.
it's been passed down from generation to generation. Let's not talk about it. And even if you go back to, let's just say, slavery, right?
Hmm.
Sometimes you can't tell the child that that person is the father because it's the white
Right.
owner of the plantation. So everybody has to be hush hush about what's going on. And those type of unhealthy behaviors have been passed down throughout
Right.
time. And so we have the challenge of trying to find a Black person who is not so damaged, right, that they can serve as a therapist, and someone who's consciously aware, because a lot of Black folks are still not in that place of
Yeah.
consciousness, right? And
Right.
so what I think is really important that you said is that you have to vet the person, right? When you
Hmm.
had the conversation with a person, you realized something within you felt right, and it was the right fit. And I want to
Yeah.
just say this because people think you go to you just go to a psychologist, and if it doesn't work out, oh my God, well then you shouldn't go to a psychologist. Who goes into a store and buys the very first couch that you see? Right? You don't
Right.
buy the first couch. You sit down. You're like,
Hmm.
I don't feel right. I don't know if that's even going to fit. You got to measure to see if it fits in the space. The whole bit,
Hmm.
that exact same process as applied to your mental and emotional state is what you have
Right.
to do when you're vetting a person, right? And so, was there something in particular when you had a conversation with this person that made you go, "Mm, that's my person"?
So not necessarily. I just felt, so I'm very in tune spiritually. And so I'm really, again, kind of part of the coping skills and that I've acquired is like how to recognize red flags, yellow flags, like, so those things. So I had, I, I had already come into that context, being mindful of, okay, this is a list of questions. In fact, that's another tactic. So as
Yes.
you vet, as you vet your therapist, come with a list of questions. Can Google like questions to ask a therapist, right? Just Google it
Yes.
and be prepared to ask those questions, and just kind of listen to your spirit, like, really, and just listen to what they say, how
Mhm.
they say it, and don't be afraid to fire him or her if it doesn't work out. I mean, just
Woo!
try, So,
Let's just
and that
pause
goes
right
with
there. This is the second time you said something, and I was like, That's this happened on the first interview. I was like, "Who don't say that so fast?" That is powerful because I am a health practitioner myself, and I tell
Mhm.
everyone, I'm like, I work for you, not the other way
Yeah,
around, right? If you
yeah,
don't like my services, fire me. right? And you,
Yeah.
that should be for your primary care physician, for everyone. If you're working, with a practitioner who has your heart and soul and health and all of that,
Mhm.
sort of in their hands, which they shouldn't, you need to have it in your own hands. But let's just say,
Right.
right, if they're your consultant in this process and they're not
Right.
doing what needs to be done, fire them and find somebody else, because sometimes the process of vetting people helps you get clear about what you want,
Absolutely.
you know
Absolutely. That is so key.
So what are
Yeah.
you what are your there's so many things I want to talk about, but I just, for people who have never gone down this path, what, just without revealing, any personal stuff, but what is a therapy session like? I mean, some people
Yeah.
have never, they're like, well, what's going to happen? Am I going to sit there and sitting on the couch and, they bring me tea and we talk, I cry, like, what happens when you have a therapy session? Hey, I
Yeah.
mean, some
So
people just, people don't know, and if you don't, sometimes what you
right.
don't know keeps you from investigating, right? You don't know you don't know what's on the other side of that door, right?
Right. Yeah. So in, so each person obviously is different. Now, for me, time is money, and I'm paying for this time first of all. So I am very intentional again about coming to each session prepared with bullet points of topics that I want to discuss, and that ranges just living life. And so for me, what I've done, even in the context of my journaling as well, is as I'm living life, I am making note of triggers, of conversations, of experiences, of questions that I want to talk about with my therapist. And there's no limit. I mean, let's so part of it is really maximizing and leveraging that 50-minute session with your therapist to as a safe sounding board to talk out, to unpack whatever's on your mind. Now, for me, again, because I like to be efficient and effective, I list out topics. Just okay, so whether it's ego, or whether it's some type of trauma, or whether it's a question about um, something that happened with in a relationship, or so that's been my approach. Now, I'll also say that my therapist, he has told me that he really appreciates the fact that I come prepared to talk about these items, right? And because he says that, well, obviously his clients are all different, of course, but I am one of the few that actually like comes to the table with a nice list of topics to really unpack.
Yes,
And so that was good feedback for me as well, because I'm like, yeah, I mean, one, this time is money,
right.
and two, I want to be better and I want to maximize this time. And so, but again, I think that also speaks to the nuance and the dynamics of the relationship that we have in
Right,
terms of trust,
right.
and transparency, and so that where I can literally just talk freely to share with him what's happening in every aspect of my life. It doesn't matter. Every
Hmm.
aspect, I am
Every
ready
aspect.
with a list. Boom, let's talk about this and go from there.
I think that's great, because I could just imagine, you walking down the street, somebody gets on your nerves, you like,
Mhm.
mhm.
Right.
That's going on my
Yep.
list. Imma talk to my therapist about that. No, mm-mm. You know,
Right.
I think that's great, because a lot of times people are not prepared, and I think so I wanna get even more granular, because I'm
Sure.
still feeling like maybe there's someone out there, they're just like, "Well, what happens?" You walk in, you sit down, they start asking you questions like, "How did you establish working norms, and what exactly does the process look like?" Like super,
Yeah.
super basic for people that are just
Okay.
like, what's going to happen as soon they call your name, you walk in, what happens after that? I'm keeping it real.
So yeah, yeah, no. So I think so. I will preface my comments by saying that it's different for each person and relationship. I think that that's
Absolutely,
important to
absolutely, yes.
put out there. For me personally, so so when I go in, he would ask me, how I'm doing, how's my week been, and that opens the door for me to just talk and just to be able to explore some emotions that I've experienced, some thoughts that I've had, some things that have happened, and he listens, and and it's a back and forth, and the way in which he helps to engage me is by asking me questions to kind of check my thinking about what I was thinking or what I was feeling at certain moments, in this conversation or in this experience. And so um, he is a relational kind of therapist. And this is kind of getting into the weeds, but because each therapist is different, he doesn't necessarily um, his approach is different than the conventional therapeutic approach. And I know that I'm opening up another kind of bucket, but the way in which he was trained, because he went to he also has experience of going to a PWI and an HBCU, and so he's been trained in different contexts, and so he has his own unique approach to engaging his clients. And so for me, I was at a point where I'm like, look, bro, I'm a black male. These are my issues. This is the people that I have received. Let's talk about it. And he will allow me to talk and allow me to unpack what I'm feeling. And then in the course of the conversation, he will put language to what I was feeling, or he will probe further and just kind of help me to further unpack a concept or a construct or an emotion. And in that process, there's just, I feel empowered, I feel heard, validated, encouraged, motivated. So those are some of the outcomes or the benefits, is being heard, being
Yes.
acknowledged, being validated as a black man in this society, right?
Yes.
And so those
Yes.
are all kind of things that I have garnered. And now I have found that it's almost become automatic, where if I get triggered, if something is happening, part of my process now is that I ask myself three questions to better understand what I'm feeling and why. The first question is, um, what am I feeling? But that is contingent upon you finding the emotion from that emotions wheel or that table that at least can hone down what you're feeling. So whether it's disappointment, anger, resentment. So that's the first question: is what am I feeling? And then why am I feeling what I'm feeling? So, like, what was it about that encounter that triggered you? Why are you feeling angry? And so that forces you to unpack that and like really dig deeper into why you are feeling what you're feeling. And then the third question is, what am I going to do about what I'm feeling? And
Mm,
so and so is that going to include journaling or more meditation or breathing or calling a friend, calling my therapist, taking a walk, working out, doing chores. Um, so that's those are the tangible kind of steps that I have learned and acquired that can help me get at these, like, this trauma happened, this issue, this incident happened, this is what I'm feeling. Why did it happen? What am I feeling? Why am I feeling this way? And then what am I going to do about it? And it's
right.
because the takeaway, then it will serve to empower you
Yes.
to take action, right? To do something different, to pivot, or to think about something differently, or to take a different approach that will make you be that much better and better navigating your emotions.
Mm.
So
That's really powerful. That's real. There's so many things you said in there. Um, but I think the emotions wheel is extremely important. I use something called the transformation cycle as well to kind of
mhm,
help people through a process. But you have to be able to name what you feel. And I think the
correct,
most powerful thing that you said was, well, what you gonna do about it? Because that's the
right,
challenge. There's actually I mean, there's kind of a thing that we do in our community where we be talking
yeah,
about stuff and we be talking about
right,
stuff and we be talking about stuff and and I
right,
can't believe that, and it's like, well, what you gonna do about it,
right,
right?
right,
Oh, I'm just gonna talk about it. right? And so now
Right.
we're upset and we're moving, sort of like a gerbil on a wheel. We're expending a
Hmm.
tremendous amount of energy, but we're not actually getting anywhere, right? Which I think
Absolutely.
is extremely important for us to know. And so, my goodness, I could go on and on and on, but again, I want to be respectful of your time. So I want to just say thank you so much for sharing. But I want to give you an opportunity, if there's something that you want to leave with people from this experience, right? And so, just to recap the experience, the first conversation was, hey, there's always a story behind the glory, right? If you're a
Mhm.
strong Black man out here trying to be successful, you need to have a dream team. And as part of that dream team, you have to care for your mental and emotional self. And then in this
Mhm.
conversation, we talked about, granularly, like, what is it to have a therapist? How did you choose a therapist? Why is it important? What's the benefit? And all of that stuff. So we talked about that as well, as an array of other topics. Um, but given all of that, um, if there's some final word, or message that you want to send to Black men who may be watching, who may be thinking about this and going, still on the fence, I don't know, thinking about it, or that may have some hesitancy, or whatever message you want to share, what would that be?
So so out of pain comes purpose. Um, Out of pain comes purpose. And I think that as you think over your life, and the extent to which you are willing and able to effect change within your community, your family, um, part of it is being anchored to purpose. And there's a whole strategy and around that, and there's that I actually help to walk people through as well in my business. But I think being mindful that nothing happens by accident, and that even in the most traumatic experiences, that somehow or another good can yet and still come out of it. That again, as a Christian, for me, that my faith is my bedrock, and I believe that all things work together for good for to those that have been called according to God's purpose. And another way of framing it is that if God allows it, it has to bless you. um, if God allows it in His infinite wisdom, in His sovereignty, in His power, somehow or another, there's that silver lining. There is some good that can and will come out of your lived experience. Um, and that's been my approach, my thinking, how I was brought up, and my purpose now. Part of it is to provide people the permission to go further, to not give up, to try something differently, to think a different way. And I think talking about my own experience, and again, as I take a deeper dive into my book as well, is you know um, to give the permission to be an example, to be a role model, to be a voice, to say, "Hey, I know where you are. I've been there. I get it. I've lived it, and yet and still somehow or another, I've been able to get to this point where I'm hoping that in some way, shape, or form, that people are encouraged to pursue their highest calling." So,
Wow. Well, that is indisputable for me, I say. Wow. Thank you so much. So much of what you said, was connected to the healing practice. I always say, allow the stress to move through you, and
mhm,
but not get stuck in you, right? That's really
right.
important, and that there's a gift in everything. Right? There is a gift
Hmm.
in everything, no matter how horrible it is. It didn't actually happen to you, it happened for you, right? But
Right.
for you to
Yeah.
do what?
Exactly.
That's up to you. It could be for you to wallow in pain for the rest of your life,
Mhm.
or to become stronger, right, as a
Right.
result of it. So, So, okay, thank you so much. Please, please tell everyone how they can get your book, how they can reach you, how they can stay connected to you. There may be people that want to do consultant work with you. Please
So
tell us, how do we get in touch with you and how do we support your efforts?
absolutely. Thank you so much, Phyllis, for having me, and I look forward to more conversations. So my book is Indisputable: The Story of a Favorite Son. You can find it on Amazon and Kindle, as well as on my website, which is courses.enyastrategies.com. That's Enyia Strategies. That's ENYIA strategies.com, where you can find my book as well as my courses that take a deeper dive into my life experience. And so part of my current business model is centered on helping people to advance their careers by providing a roadmap for them to successfully navigate the workforce, and then also to help Black people land jobs on Capitol Hill. I'm a former House and Senate staffer on Capitol Hill, and so there is that critical need to strengthen and lengthen the pipeline of staffers of color to get onto Capitol Hill and into federal government. And so you can find me on LinkedIn. My name Okey, last name Enyia, Enyia. I'm on Facebook under my name. My Instagram is Enyia Strategies, as well as my Twitter is Enyia Strategies. I'm on YouTube as my name, Okey Enyia. And yeah, my website again is courses.enyastrategies.com. I'm happy to serve. Look forward to hearing from you all. Please, if you go to my website, create a login and subscribe to my email list. I provide a lot of free content as well. So take some time to explore that content. Happy to partner with you all in anything that you find of interest on my website. And I look forward to building from there.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And please, yes, log on to his website and get the free stuff, but buy the book too. I mean,
Yeah,
he's a good brother that's out there doing great work, and the way we support each other is through also exchanging of that energy that is money. So please do
absolutely.
order the book on Amazon, and sign up for the website, learn and stay connected. I will make sure that there is a description with this video as well, so that everyone will have the information in written form as well. Thank you so much. Okay, take care, be well, and be radiant.
Thank you. You too.